I brought my notes up here only because there are some direct quotes that I want to give to you guys that were written by newspaper reporters, and they wrote it so well I didn't want to mess it up, so I brought these up here with me. I can't help but think that I've got the fun part of the presentations this evening. The next two presenters, including myself, we really want to prepare you for what you're about to see when we walk over to Grant Hall and we walk over to the tennis courts. What I'd like to focus on is what it was like to be a spectator. And as I was thinking about how to present the material, it kind of came down to I could actually group the individuals and the experiences of the spectators as those who really wanted to be there and those who really didn't want to be there. And aside from the prisoners and the defendants, there was actually some other folks who were there out of an obligation. They had to be there, and it wasn't so pleasant for them. So who got to go to the trial? As I look out at the crowd, I think we have about 100 people here. We've got distinguished military personnel, we've got historians, we've got writers, and we've got family members of those individuals, and that's pretty much a good indication of who was invited to go to the trial. You had politicians, you had military personnel, you had people connected with the government, and all of those individuals were absolutely thrilled to be a part of the trial. If you can imagine, they had already been through the tragedy that was the assassination. They had gone through the funeral for President Lincoln. They had a lot of sadness. So when the trial came about, it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of see justice do its job and to see those who were accused of helping John Wilkes Booth assassinate President Lincoln get their just due. So there was a tremendous amount of interest in the trial, and quite frankly, I think Leah had mentioned there's about 100 of us in here. The courtroom itself is only the size, slightly larger of a racquetball court. And not all of us are going to be allowed up in there when we go over there. We're going to have to do 50 at a time, as safety fire codes suggest. But back in 1865, there were upwards of 300 people stuffed into that courtroom. So let's start talking about what it felt like to be a spectator. First of all, it was quite warm, as you can imagine. It was in the spring and summer months, and it was quite uncomfortable. All they could really do, without air conditioning, without ceiling fans, is raise the windows. They had 4 windows over there in the courtroom. They had a prison cell door, which the prisoners had walked through, so they opened that wide up. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of fans going, a lot of newspapers swaying. Mary Surratt, one of the prisoners, had a palm leaf fan. She kind of covered herself up. So it was uncomfortably warm, uncomfortably overcrowded, and back then there was also a nasty habit of spitting tobacco. There was over 20 tobacco spittoons scattered inside of this courtroom. So you can imagine the stench. But regardless of all that, you had spectators showing up like gleeful sightseers, just thrilled to be there. Politicians, as I mentioned before, were mostly made up of radical Republicans who had a vested interest in seeing whether or not Jefferson Davis was the real ringleader of the assassination attempt. You had religious leaders, Bishop Simpson, who I want to say he presided over the funeral and gave the eulogy at President Lincoln's funeral in Springfield. Bishop McElveen, he was there on hand, and he was the religious envoy over to Great Britain. He tried to convince Great Britain not to get involved in the Civil War. He was a very honored man over there. They really had a lot of appreciation and respect for him. In fact, he was the lone, I believe, American who's ever lied in state in Westminster Abbey, and even to this day. He passed away over there. So you had these individuals, And you also had nearly half of the spectators were made up of women, young ladies, wives, daughters who, as one writer had suggested, were just thrilled with the idea of seeing prisoners in shackles and chains and desperados who had dared to try to overthrow the government. So you had them on hand. You had, as I had mentioned before, government workers. One gentleman, his name was J.D. Blakesley. He brought his autographed book. He wanted to make sure. He knew he was going to see some famous people in the crowd. And actually, he took his autographed book, gave it to the commission members, and all of them signed it. He also got General Grant's autograph, as well as Boston Corbett, the man who shot John Wilkes Booth. So he was thrilled. He wanted to be there. You had ladies bringing their retractable eyeglasses to get a better view of the conspirators, and really that was probably the biggest attraction and reason for them to want to be there, those who weren't the radical Republicans. So moving on from there, so what else was it like to be a spectator? Well, quite frankly, at the beginning of the trial,